right, so in 4.1 we learned about writing equations in slope-intercept form, and in the title you literally know you're going to use the slope and the y-intercept. So today we're learning about point-slope form. So they're going to give you a point that your line goes through and the slope of your line, okay? And you're going to use this formula, which we have already talked about. This is not new. We used this when we were graphing. Now we're using it to write equations. So when we are given the point and the slope, we should be thinking in our minds point-slope form, okay? So you have a y minus y1. This is kind of small, so I'm gonna write it out to the side here. Equals m times x minus x1. Your point is represented using the x1, y1. And then you have your slope, right? Which is your slope. So this y that doesn't have a number, see how it doesn't have a number down here? And this x, you don't plug anything in for those when you're writing your equation. Nothing. Nada. They just say x and y, okay? So when you write the equation, you will not fill in for the y and the x. You only fill in for the x1 and y1, all right? So when they gave you the point and the slope, this point represents the x1 and the y1, and then your slope is the m. So when I plug in, I keep that y minus, and then I'm going to plug in the y1 right here, 3, equals slope, which is 1/4, and then you've got your parenthesis, x, keep that x, minus, and then you put in your x1 right here, which is -8. Okay? Then you're going to simplify. So I've got y minus 3 equals 1/4. And the only thing I really need to simplify here is that double negative needs to become a positive. Now from here, I could ask you to write it in slope-intercept form, and if I do that, then you're going to have to distribute your 1/4 and move the 3 over. But I just asked you to write it in point-slope form, and this is point-slope form, so we will leave it as is. Now, if this wasn't a double negative, like if there was already a plus there, or if this was, well, you won't have a plus there unless this is negative. So if it just had a minus sign, and this was a positive number back here, then you wouldn't have to rewrite it, right? You would just be done. Okay. So here we go. The point that you're going through is going to represent your x1 and your y1, and then your slope is the m. So you have y minus the y value in your point here, which is 6, equals your slope times x minus, and then plug in your x value. Do you have anything you need to simplify as far as like double negatives anywhere? Nope. So that is point-slope form. All right, so again, they're giving you a point and the slope, but this time instead of writing slope, I already put it with an m. So this is your x1, this is your y1, and then you're going to plug in. So I've got y minus, and then I'm going to plug in my y value of my point, which is -1, equals my slope, -2, times x minus the x value of my point. And then I'm just going to assess, do I have any double negatives I need to fix? Yes, right here. So this will be y plus 1 is equal to -2 times x minus 3. All right, and one more of these, I believe. So again, this is my x1, y1, and then I've got my slope. So y minus I've got 0 as my y, equals my slope times x minus the x value of my point. And then I don't leave y minus 0 because what is y minus 0? It's just y. So y equals negative 2/3 times x minus 4. Okay. So let's say that they gave you 2 points. To write an equation in point-slope form, you have to have 1 point and you have to have the slope. So if they give you 2 points, you have a point, right? But what are you missing? You're missing the slope, right? So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to find the slope because you need the point and a slope. All right, so on number 5, I gave you a graph and I identified 2 points. So I'm going to write those down. And I'm going to use those to find my slope, just like we did in the last lesson. So I'm going to subtract my y's on top. So remember, if you want to avoid double negatives, then use the point that has a negative value. Now, sometimes they both have negatives, right? And it can't be avoided. But I'm going to use this one first since this is the only one that has a negative. So negative 2 minus 2 on the top. And since I used negative 2 first, I have to use 3 first on bottom. So if I plug that in my calculator, I should get, let's see, negative 4 over 2. So negative 2 is my slope. Now I'm still writing in point-slope form. I have the slope, now I just need a point. So I can use either of these points. It doesn't matter. I want to try to avoid this double negative I will end up with if I use this point. So I'm going to use 1, 2. So now I have a point and a slope, and I'm going to use my point-slope form. So what does the point represent in your equation? X1 and Y1, right? So I have Y minus my Y value equals my slope times X minus my X value. Do I have any double negatives to fix? No. So I'm done. Okay, so now I've just given 2 points. So I have a point, but I need the slope. So I'm going to plug in. Now I'm going to start with the one that has negatives because then I can avoid the double negatives. So I'm going to say negative 6 minus the other y value over, since I used negative 6 first on top, I have to use negative 2 first on bottom. So negative 2 minus 4. Let's see, that would be negative 12 over negative 6. So that would be a positive 2. And then I'm going to pick one of these points because I need a point. It doesn't matter which point. I don't like the negatives here, so I'm going to use the 4, 6. And remember that point that you're going through is going to represent the x1, y1. So I have y minus my y value is equal to my slope times x minus my x value. By the way, if you chose to use the other point, it would still be correct. You would just end up with y plus 6 and then a 2 and then x plus 2. So you could end up with like 2 different answers. Are you with me? Okay. A couple more of those. So I'm given 2 points. I'm going to find the slope first. I don't have any negatives, so I'm going to start with the one that has bigger number over here. So I'm going to do the 10 minus the y value over here, 4. over, since I used 10 first, I need to use 3 first on bottom, so 3 minus 1. Okay, I can plug this into my calculator or do it by hand, whatever. I get 6 on top, right, and 2 on bottom, so 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then you're going to pick one of these points. I'll let you guys pick. Do you want to pick the first point or the second point? First point, so we'll do 1, 4. And remember that point represents the x1 and the y1. So I have y minus 4 is equal to my slope, 3, times x minus my x value, and there's the point slope form because I don't have any double negatives or anything to simplify, right? All right, so on number 8, again, I have 2 points, but I also need the slope. So there is no way for me to avoid double negatives, right? Because I have negatives on both of them. So I'm just going to start with this one. Negative 4 minus, and then plug in, I've got my other y value, negative 1. Over, since I started with negative 4, I'm going to have to start with 8 on bottom. 8 minus, and then a negative 4. We got double negatives everywhere. All right, so let's see, on top I would get negative 3, and on bottom I would get 12, so I end up with 1/4, negative 1/4, right? And then I'm going to use one of these points. Which one do you guys want to use, first or second? Second. I like it. Does it matter? No, but I only have one negative in this one, right? So I've got y minus, and then I plug in my y value here, negative 4 equals the slope times x minus the x value. And then you're going to make sure that you simplify this double negative. So I've got y plus 4 is equal to 1/4 times x minus 8. Negative 1/4. All right, so these are just like those ones that were in the last one. Remember, you're going to make points out of these right here. So they want you to write a linear function. Let's add a little note here. Put a little note. In point slope, and slope-intercept forms. All right, so we're going to put it in point slope form, and then we're going to use that to make slope-intercept form. Okay, so we'll make sure we write them both out. On the homework, you actually have to do that for every single problem. So when you look back at this, you'll probably want to refer to these two if you can't remember how to put it in slope-intercept form. All right, so I'm going to do what I've been doing with these points here. So remember, if I have f of 4, that 4 represents x, and then the outcome is negative 2, that represents the y. So I make a point with that. I've got a point for negative 2. And then same thing with this point. So this point would be 8, 4. So the first thing I have to do is find my slope. All right, I have a negative in this point, so I'm going to do this one first. So I've got negative 2 minus the y value here, 4, over, and then I'm going to take that x value, 4 minus 8. So on top, that would give me negative 6, and on the bottom, I would end up with negative 4, so 6 over 4, which is 3 over 2. All right, and then I'm going to have to use one of these points so that I can write the equation of the line. So I'm going to do the 8, 4 just because this one has a negative. but you could do that one if you wanted to. So remember, your point will represent the x1 and the y1. And I'm going to plug into point slope form because that's what I have. So I've got y minus 4 is equal to your slope times x minus your x value. So this is point slope form, right? I asked for point slope. So this is point slope form. So if you want to, on your homework, you're going to want to label that. You can put PS if you want to for point slope form. So that's one part of your answer, right? I'm going to do the other part on this side. Now, if I want to write in slope-intercept form, I'm going to make a note here, solve for y. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and simplify this side by distributing your 3/2. So I'm going to keep the y minus 4. I'm going to distribute 3/2 times x is just 3/2 times x. And then 3/2 times negative 8 would be negative 12. But remember, you have a calculator, so if you need to do 3/2 times negative 8, then do that. All right, and you get your negative 12. All right, then you got to get this y by itself, so you're going to add this 4, and you have a like term right here. You can put that with the negative 12, so we're going to add 4, and you get y equals 3/2 x minus 8. Now y is by itself, right? So you might want to put, this is slope-intercept form. So on your homework, if you can just identify which one's your point slope and which one's your slope-intercept, then we're good. All right, let's do one more. So I have 2 points here. I've got 2, 3, and the other point is 6, 5. And the first thing I'm going to do is find my slope. So I don't have any kind of negative, so I'm going to go with the one that has bigger numbers. So I've got 5 minus 3 on top. Since I started with 5, I'll start with 6 on the bottom. 6 minus 2. So that gives me 2 on top and 4 on bottom. That's 1/2. And then pick one of these. I'm just going to go with the smaller numbers because that feels like a good thing to do. And then we're going to write this in point slope form first. So remember, this represents x1 and y1. So y minus, and then you're going to subtract that y value, 3, equals slope times x minus your x value. Do you have anything to simplify here as far as like double negatives or where you have a 0? No. So this is your point slope form. I'm just going to write this up here so we can manipulate it. All right, now I'm going to put it in slope-intercept form, which just means solve for y. So the first thing you have to do is distribute. By the way, these steps should constantly be the same. You should always distribute and then move the number. Distribute, move the number. Okay, so distribute first. 1/2 times x is 1/2 x, and half of negative 2 is negative 1. So I distributed. Now I'm going to move the number. So add 3, and that will always go with this number that's at the back here every single time. So y is equal to 1/2 times x plus 2, and this is your slope-intercept, right? And you could write that out if you want to, but otherwise you can just say slope-intercept.